Hello and welcome back to the Johnny Gets Cash YouTube channel. Today is a little bit different. I'm going to be showing you something that you've seen in the background of a lot of my videos, and it is something that many of you have commented asking to find out more about. Today I'm going to be introducing you to one of my own personal cars, my 2005 Subaru Impreza WRX. Today's video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Now, it's no secret that life can get pretty hectic sometimes for all of us, but for me, that's generally when I've got a queue of cars waiting to be worked on, and sometimes as a result of that, eating properly can take a bit of a back seat, which is never a good thing. But that's where HelloFresh comes in. Using the HelloFresh app or website, it's quick and easy to order healthy, convenient and delicious meals delivered right to your door. And with a new menu every week, there's always loads of options to choose from. What's more is that HelloFresh is totally flexible. There are no commitments and you can tailor the service to fit your needs. You can pause, cancel, change address or number of meals and people that you want to cook for. It's as easy as that. If you want to give HelloFresh a try, you can get 60% off your first order and 20% off the next 2 months, as well as free gifts when you use my code JGC. Click the link in the video description or scan the QR code that's on screen now to start your order. So I said this is one of my personal cars. Yes, I've got several cars myself, so cars that aren't in stock, cars that I keep. Now I would have called this a daily, but I have various different cars which I use daily. Now, to me, cars are like pairs of shoes. You know, you don't have one pair of shoes that does everything. I've got several daily vehicles, all for different purposes. But generally speaking, if I'm just moving myself around, as in not carrying lots of parts, etc., I will be using this. This is a 2005 Impreza WRX, like I said in the intro. It's not an STI car, despite the canards and the wing. It is just a normal WRX, and I'll explain why I went for just a WRX rather than the STI version. Essentially, I wanted something that I wasn't going to be too precious about. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you will be aware that I do have my 1995 Escort RS Cosworth, and that's a car I've lusted after for years and years and years, and several years ago I bought one, and it's great that I've got it. I'm very pleased. I love that car. I love it so much, in fact, that I barely use it, and that there is the problem. Having a car that has to live 99% of its life in a tent within a garage to keep it in nice condition, that's all good and well in terms of resale value, but the reason I wanted a Cosy when I was younger is because it was the rally hero. It was a car you could really throw about, and you see it on TV and you just think, what a thing. And that's what I thought I was going to be buying, and as such I've bought something that couldn't be more different these days. Not a complaint, I'm just saying. So when I wanted something that I was going to be able to use just as a bit of a daily fun car, the Subaru Impreza was high on my list, again being a rally icon. Now, I didn't go for the STI for the same reason as I just mentioned on that Escort. It was something that's a bit special. An STI is a very, very special car, and I knew that if I had one of those, I'd end up treating it just like I treat the Cosy and not want to use it quite as much. So the standard cooking WRX version was for me. However, I do really love the look of the STI. So just having a normal WRX wasn't going to cut it in terms of the looks. So I went for one, and I've got the STI wing on it. I've got the canards. Now, I haven't got the STI scoop. I would like to put the scoop on there, but I haven't found one yet. Of course, I don't want to go in aftermarket and get a carbon fiber one or anything. I just want a normal color-coded STI scoop. Haven't found one that's sensible money yet, so that is why that WRX scoop is still the way it is. Something else you'll notice about my WRX are these 18-inch OZ Pro Drive wheels. They really do complete the look of the car. Now, you may be thinking, why on earth have you got a silver Impreza, not a blue Impreza on gold wheels? Well, I know blue and gold is the classic look, and that is what 99% of people would go for. And that's exactly why I didn't want to go for one. I like things to be a little bit different. Now, for me, this it's almost like a pewter type silver on this Impreza, and that with the gold wheels was a look that I really fell in love with. And that is why I've gone for something a little bit left field in a silver Impreza. The other beauty of this being a WRX is it's actually not that bad to drive daily. Unless you really cane it, you're going to see mid-20s MPG out of it. It's really quite a sensible car. Also, being a four-door, I can use it as a normal saloon car if I want to. Not that I ever do, it only ever really carries me, but if I ever want to use it to carry passengers, it's quite a practical car. It's got a big boot. I've actually used this thing to do a tip run in the past, and it handled it absolutely fine. What I'm trying to say is it's a very, very usable, practical car, as well as being something fun. Now, if I didn't want that fun element, I could have gone for just a normal Impreza, I know that, but I wanted something not as crazy as an STI and not as boring as a normal Impreza, so the WRX fitted exactly in that gap. This isn't the fastest car in the world. It's only had 221 brake horsepower from the factory when it was new. So being that this car is now 19 years old, and I know that's hard to believe looking at it, but it's 19 years old. So I doubt it's still got all the horses it left the factory with all those years ago. However, that said, relatively low power, but it's a very light feeling car, and obviously it's turbocharged. Now, the way these older cars deliver that power from that turbo, it really packs a punch. So yes, not a huge amount of power on paper, certainly not compared to modern cars, but this definitely feels a lot more punchy than most modern cars you're going to drive, and as such it's a hoot to drive. Even if I'm only going to the gym or going to the shop to get something quickly, I have fun every time I get behind the wheel of this car. It's just something I can't put my finger on. It's I don't want to sound corny, but it's almost raw. I really, really have a soft spot for these WRXs, and mine especially, because in my opinion it looks perfect. This is the way a blob eye Impreza should look, I think. If you've got a keen eye, you'll notice inside you can't really see the interior. Now, it's only got a standard WRX interior anyway, but I have seat covers on there because most of the time I'm covered in oil or diesel or filler dust or something horrible that I wouldn't want to get into a nice interior. So another reason, if I had an STI, I wouldn't want to get anything on those seats, so they'd be covered up all the time anyway. So to have this interior with covers on really makes no difference, but I will concede that the STI interior is a thing of beauty. However, in my case, it's completely unnecessary. So again, the WRX wins on that front. So aside from the STI add-ons, these alloy wheels and an exhaust, this is pretty much a standard WRX. It hasn't had any crazy tuning done to it, which is the other thing. A lot of people will say Imprezas have a reputation for being unreliable, or they've got some sort of head gasket issues. I get that some have issues like that, but certainly not this one. Now, in my opinion, that's all to do with the way you treat a car. If I had have had this thing tuned to the guns and just made it a lot more powerful, clearly things are going to find their own level, and weak spots will emerge, and that's where the term unreliability comes from, I believe. This one has been nothing but reliable in my ownership. I've had this thing roughly 2 years now, I think, and it's never ever put a foot out of line. I honestly can't fault it. It just does everything so perfectly, and for me it is the perfect daily. So once upon a time, you used to see Imprezas on the road all the time, and especially these blob eyes. These were, if I can dare use the term, slightly common cars once upon a time, but really nowadays you don't see so many. Now, whether that's because rust has claimed a lot of them, or they've been tuned so much that they've had mechanical issues that haven't been viable to repair, and therefore they've been broken for parts or sent to scrap, I don't know. But what I do know is there's not a lot of these around right now, so you could class this as a pseudo modern rare car. And something that feeds into that, which I actually quite like, when I first got the car, I noticed that every other Subaru you saw, on the rare occasion you did see one, everyone would wave at each other. And at first I thought this was a bit weird, I wasn't really into it. But the longer I've had this car, the more I've come to be part of that. And I actually quite enjoy the camaraderie that Scooby owners have. I think it is, again, because you don't see many of them anymore. And to have one, you kind of automatically become part of the club. And I think that's quite cool, to be honest. Now, something else that's been done to this car that divides opinion, I believe, are the rally flaps. Now, on a normal car, I don't really like the look of that, but A, on an Impreza, I think they suit rally flaps on a rally car, and B, they actually do serve a purpose. I've said it several times in a lot of my videos that where I live is very, very muddy, especially in the winter months. There isn't really any proper drainage. Everything's rural, so as such, we have a lot of mud and mess on the roads. And don't get me wrong, most of the time you see this car, it's covered in mud. It's probably half an inch deep in mud most of the time, but the majority of it is stopped by these flaps. And again, they serve a purpose. That's why they're on the car. Yes, some people don't like them, but for me, I don't think they're too bad, and they do a job. Now, I said this car's always dirty. I've cleaned it up for this video, but it's generally always dirty. And again, it comes down to this. Certain cars look awful when they're dirty, I think. They need to be kept clean, otherwise they just look like they've been completely uncared for. But when you see a Scooby that's dirty, generally speaking, most people don't think, oh, someone's a slob, they haven't cleaned their car. What they tend to think is, that's been driven like a Scooby should be driven. And that's exactly right. I mean, this thing definitely gets driven the way a Scooby should be driven, in my opinion. And most of the time it shows the mud and the warfare to back that up. I mentioned how bad the roads are in the winter around here. Another thing to mention on that point, in the winter when it's very cold and icy, or even if we have a bit of snow, our roads don't get salted. So to have something that's four-wheel drive is essential. Now, one of my other daily cars is just behind me, this Toyota Hilux. So yes, I do have a four-wheel drive that I have access to all the time, and of course you've seen my Range Rover as well. However, those don't perform in the way that a Scooby does, of course, but this thing not only performs the same all year round regardless of conditions, whether that be sun, rain or snow, it's so predictable. This car looks after you. If it's snowy or icy and you tend to give it a little bit too much, the car will play with you, it will step out, but also it will look after you. It's one of the most predictable and controllable cars I've ever driven. And as such, after even just a few weeks with a Subaru, when you first own one, the way you drive changes because you tend to trust the machine that much. As I say, very, very predictable. Now, one of my favourite parts of this car, ironically, is a part that most people will complain about, and it is the gearbox. Now, in this non-STI car, I've got a 5-speed manual. Obviously, the STIs had a 6-speed, the WRXs just had a 5-speed. And those 5-speed boxes are, let's say they have a reputation for being on the weaker side. However, it's such a precise, lovely, lovely gearbox to drive with. I really enjoy driving it. And this box, yes, you have to look after it. You can't be crazy. You can't dump gears and drop things like you probably would in an STI. You have to sort of be a little bit sympathetic with it. But it's so precise. It's almost bolt action smooth. It's such a great gearbox. Now, I do understand a lot of people have had issues with them, but again, that comes down to power, I believe. If you start putting lots and lots of power through these cars, the gearbox is going to come up as a weak spot. It just will. So in my setup, which is largely standard and no more increased power than factory, it's perfect, obviously. There's absolutely no concerns, and I can't complain at all about the gearbox. And as I say, definitely one of my favourite parts of the car. Now, something that might surprise you about this car, being that what I do with the cars you see me working on to sell, I do favour lower mileage examples. I tend to do that because they are a lot easier to sell. But one thing that I always say is it's all about the service history. Now, this car, if you look it up, it's got just shy, as we stand today, just shy of 130,000 miles on it, which when you say it quickly sounds like a hell of a lot of miles. However, for a 19-year-old car, that actually works out as average usage. But the other thing is, when I bought this car, I haven't done a huge amount of mileage in it. I think I bought it on something like 127. The reason I didn't turn it down flat based on the mileage is because it had a phenomenal amount of service history. This thing has been serviced exactly as it should have been, when it should have been, its whole life. And that really did appeal to me. However, the kicker to that is, although it was mechanically very well looked after, when I bought it, it was in a bit of a state externally. Now, I never did any videos on it because it was always in the background, and I just wanted to get this thing prepped because I wasn't going to drive it when it was all beaten up. But basically, when I got it, it had been what I like to term as council estated. So it had been ragged around some sort of estate somewhere, and every corner on each bumper had been completely scuffed and battered. These canards weren't on the bumper when I bought it, but everything was scuffed. This wing over here had been dragged down a wall. The rear spoiler, which is obviously off an STI car, was blue, but it had been, I think, rattle canned in silver, and it wasn't the right shade. The high level brake light on the spoiler wasn't wired up, so what they'd done to get through MOT is just put a piece of tape over it. What I found out while fixing that and repainting that spoiler is that the spoiler itself wasn't actually fixed on with anything other than a little bit of silicone and hopes and dreams. So that was an accident waiting to happen. So when I first got this car, basically there was a lot to do to it on the outside. Now, yes, it was very well serviced, but someone just hadn't cared about the way it looked. So as such, when I bought it, there was a little bit to do. Looking back now, and for the sake of this video, I wish I had have recorded it or made some sort of videos on it, but I know I've got some still images of it somewhere, of the things I had to do to it and just how much had to be stripped to get it to this level. And you know, that's just the way it is. When I have a car, it has to look, it doesn't have to be clean all the time, but it has to look like it's being cared for. This one has mechanically been cared for, but it just didn't look the part. So that's pretty much all I had to do to it. It's quite a bit of paint work, a few repairs. And I've checked because it had mismatched tyres, something else I can't stand on a car like this, mismatched tyres. So changed all 4 tyres on it, went through the electrics. It had a sub in it at one point, and all that wiring was just left. That's all been ripped out and returned to standard as it should be. And its party piece, actually, it had in the festoon light holder in the interior light, rather than a normal light, it had what only I can describe as a flashing disco bulb type thing. It flashed all the different colours of the rainbow when you open the door. I don't know why anyone would do that, but again, that's had to go. So the story of this car is, I bought it in a bit of a state, but underneath I could tell it was a good car. I've put quite a bit of work into it to make it look the way it does, and I just use it daily. I just enjoy it. Now, on holidays and holidays when it's sunny, I use that Cosworth, obviously, but I would never park that on the street or leave it anywhere and walk away. This I can happily leave somewhere, and I won't lose any sleep about it getting damaged. Maybe one day these will be valuable enough that you should care about it like that, but as I say, at the moment, it's just a WRX. So it's not special enough to lose sleep about or to get het up if someone touches it. But it's also fun, reliable, and good looking enough that I personally really enjoy it. So there we are, guys. I've tried to give you a bit of an insight into the Scooby. A lot of you have asked about it, and here she is. Now, I will obviously answer any questions you've got if you drop them in the comments. But for now, I hope at least that this has gone some way towards answering some of the questions you guys have had in the past. And it's nice to give us some screen time, because I'm aware it's always in the background and largely overlooked. So yeah, it's nice to sing her praises once in a while. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.